Hi folks, welcome back to the Rangers Reviews press conference reaction. This is live. First and foremost to our members before going public later on. If you want to get these videos nice and early, then become a YouTube member for $2.99 a month. Chris, another press conference. They seem to happen every 20 seconds at this stage of the season. Jack Butland was speaking to the media, as well as Philippe, Clement. A lot of interesting things to come out of it today. In fact, let's start with Butland before we go into Clement. Chris, he was speaking about not only his future, but some of the talks that he's had with the Rangers hierarchy, which was an interesting bit of insight over summer. Give us a taste of what he had to say, and then we're going to hear from him in a clip in a second.
I think sometimes the player parts of these press conferences are not generally the most exciting. The players these days very media trained. It's very rare that you get a news line, or very rare that in that kind of setting that you do get a real bit of insight, actually get something a bit more from the player rather than man looking forward to playing football match. But I think when Butland speaks, there's always something just a bit more there. There's a bit more depth to Jack Butland than a lot of these players. He always speaks very well, and as you say, I thought that those couple of questions round about those talks that he's had, not just with the manager, obviously on different figures at the football club. The manager was actually asked about Jack's comments as well, and I think it shows alignment is one of the words that perhaps one of the buzzwords that we use in terms of transfers and the way that clubs are operating these days. And I think you see an alignment there between Clement and Butland, and between those two and the general football department, and also the board as well. So Jack certainly sounded like a guy who's happy here, who feels that he's in the right place to continue his career, to continue playing football. I think if he wanted to move on, it would be fairly easy for him to do so. Now, the manager, as we're going to talk about, touched on how difficult it can be to get some players to leave the football club. If Jack Butland wanted to move, he could make it very easy. Now, one call to his agent, and things could happen very quickly. We know there's interest in him in January from Nottingham Forest. Hopefully, the phone doesn't ring from a Rangers perspective, because there will be a number that will test their resolve. But you get the feeling that speaking to him again, it would take a big offer both to the club and both to Jack for that to have to go anywhere and lead anywhere, and for him to have to leave the football club this summer. So I think that will perhaps set a few minds at ease, because how often did we speak about Jack towards the end of last season? Almost we felt like we're at times bracing the fans for he may well leave. It's the news that we didn't want to bring. It's a topic that we didn't want to speak about, but we had to be realistic on it. We had to be aware that a player of his quality, ticking the profile boxes that he ticks, we had to almost brace people for the fact that he could well leave. I think the longer it goes on, hopefully the chances of that happening diminish. And as he's speaking to him earlier on, and as I read and watch the press conference, I think the fans will get a sense of reassurance from what he had to say.
Yeah, well, he was also asked about the assurances that he sought as he seeks to, as you're saying, Chris, speaking today at the press conference. No player, even though Clement, as we'll come on to speak about, has been pretty black and white about Jack Butland's future, and the fact that he needs to keep him at the club. Obviously, if a ridiculous offer was to come in, then Rangers are not in a position to turn down ridiculous offers for anyone, are they? But Butland was asked about that desire to prolong his stay at Ibrox beyond the season, despite that interest that is there in him. And he had an interesting little bit of insight into some of the conversations that he's been having, not only with Philippe, Clement, but other members at the football club.
We've got a good relationship. I think there's certainly an idea of what we want to achieve and ultimately want to be successful here. So we've had conversations, my conversations with the club, or what we doing, where we going, how far are we going, and how far are we pushing, which is, as any player at the club, is what you want to know. You want to know the ambitions. So for me, no cloudy areas over that. I'm looking forward to this season and looking forward to playing as well as I can.
So you say conversations, is it with Philippe, Clement, or is it with people above?
With everybody. I've been, when you get the opportunity to speak to any of the directors on planes when we travel, and you always pick the brains and speak to people, and that's what this club's all about. We've got to be together, and it's a concern of mine. I'm not concerned, but it's a concern. It's good to speak to those people. It's good to know where the club's at and the direction and the optimism and things like that. As a player, there's certainly things that you want to know and be a part of.
So Jack Butland's cornering Rangers directors on planes. He was cut off slightly prematurely there, but that's what happens on these flights, Chris, to European qualifiers around Europe. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think Rangers fans and I'm sure people watching this video will probably quite like to hear the type of ownership that Butland is speaking with there. Quite often with footballers in the modern game, it feels like clubs are only there for their goods, and there's an element of Butland speaking about that in that answer. He's not here to finish second for 3 seasons, and I'm sure he will not be satisfied with that. It needs to work for him, but equally he, I think, appreciates the direction that the club needs to go in. And it's not often you hear a player speak like that, is it? And I thought that was some interesting insight from Butland.
As you say, he's not here because he grew up idolising Rangers and just always wanted to pull on the jersey, always wanted to play at Ibrox, and there's that emotional attachment. Ultimately, it's a job for him, and he's being well paid for his efforts, but at the end of his career, he wants to look back and have as much to show for it as possible. And I spoke a lot last season about his England caps and what they have meant to him and what they may well mean to him again, hopefully going forward. But the medal that he won last year, the chance to challenge for other medals last season, that's why he signed for Rangers, and that was part of the selling package that he signed up for last year. If he felt that those opportunities would not materialise this season and the seasons to follow, if he felt that Clement was not the right manager to deliver that, if he felt that the work they're looking to do in the transfer market was not going to be conducive to that, as I say, it would be fairly easy for him to move on. He would not be short of Premier League clubs that would fancy a shot or fancy a deal this summer. So I think as you say, that the fact that he's speaking as openly, hopefully it does put a few minds at ease, because it's not been throughout all the transfer talk and all the rumours we've had to discuss over the course of summer. Jack Butland has not been one. The manager has been very, very clear, as you say, on he's arguably the only guy in the squad who's not up for grabs, who they really do not want to sell, and that speaks volumes for Jack Butland's quality. It speaks volumes for, I think, the buy-in that he's clearly got at present as well.
Yeah, Philippe Clement was asked about Jack Butland and those comments later in the press conference, and here is what he had to say on his goalkeeper.
Shows also that we're on a good way, because people with that quality, and they feel like this story is not going the right way, they step out of the story and they will have several other opportunities. So Jack feels what's going on inside the building, what's going on inside the squad, how things are evolving here in every sense. Things that fans cannot see, because they only see the game and the result at the end, and you guys also. So it's a really big signal, I think, that somebody after his season, somebody with his quality is saying that. I think it's a really symbolical thing.
Chris, I'm going to be a bit controversial. Butland had a brilliant season up until March, right? And then if you look at his numbers from March to May, he wasn't as good. Now, he'd carried Rangers for a lot of that season, so I don't think he was anywhere near deserving of the criticism of others. And there's a lot of games. Think back to the Kilmarnock game where it looked like Rangers were going to be able to really mount a title challenge until the last, and it was his big save at 1-0 down. He had a lot of big moments. He obviously hadn't played a kind of 50-55 game season in quite a while. He's now got Liam Kelly in his competition. It's obviously clear who the number one is there. With that said, no one in a Rangers shirt really covered themselves in glory from March onwards, did they? So everyone knows just how important he will be going forward this season. And that point that Clement makes about, look, he sees what's going on behind the scenes. He knows the direction that the club are going in. Also, at the start of his press conference, I thought was interesting that Butland spoke about the contrast from this time last season to now. And it does feel like that bond between the player and manager there is pretty strong. Obviously non-negotiable that if Rangers are going to make the Champions League starting tomorrow, they'll have to not only not concede 5 goals like last season, but have some big performances from Butland over the next few games.
They will, but I don't think that will come as a surprise to him. Like, he sees himself as a big game player. He, as you mentioned, Liam Kelly has come in, but it's very obvious who the Rangers number one is right now. Now, Jack Butland, head and shoulders above Liam Kelly, and that's no disrespect to Liam, who's a good goalkeeper at a certain level. Jack Butland is a potential Champions League goalkeeper, though, and as you say, if Rangers are going to qualify for the Champions League, it will take big performances, one right across this side tomorrow night, but certainly from the goalkeeper, and that's not something that Jack will shy away from. He always speaks very well, even in the more difficult moments last season. I thought he provided a bit of perspective on how things were unfolding. But as you touched on there, I thought interesting that he was only in the building a couple of weeks by this stage, 12 months ago, and you do wonder, did he already get a feeling of there's something not quite right here? This is potentially heading one way and could go one way very, very quickly. Now, ultimately, it did. We know that Michael Beale lost his job just a couple of months into the campaign, and Jack then spoke a couple of times after that about how difficult that was at the start. It did go well for a while. It didn't end well, and that is, of course, the challenge, not just for Jack Butland, but for every member of this squad, whether they were here last season or not. That final part of the season has to be better. That is where the medals are dished out. That's where Rangers' legacies are made. That's where you earn your money, in effect. Now, it's fine doing so much work. Rangers did so much good work last season, but couldn't see it out. That has to change, and that's the same for Jack Butland as well as every member of the squad.
Yeah, Clement also speaking about tomorrow's game against Dynamo Kyiv, of course, which is taking place at Hampden and not Ibrox. It's going to be interesting to see, Chris, how that plays out, because we've mentioned this over the past fortnight or so. A home crowd can be slightly cliche in European football, that they might make a big impact, 12 man, etc., etc. But I think simply Rangers have won too many games with a big home atmosphere and got too many results that they shouldn't have over previous seasons to not say that it is a big factor, that Ibrox home atmosphere in these European ties. Hampden is different. We know that the fans are further away from the park. Clement was asked about the importance of the atmosphere tomorrow. Rangers did well against Kyiv last week, and I think they showed they have nothing to fear, but still going to be difficult to reach this playoff round. And this is what he had to say on playing at the National Stadium in that Champions League qualifier tomorrow evening.
I hope that, and that the fans feel already more at home after the first time. And the first time it's always like the first day in school. You feel a little bit uncomfortable. It will be now for a lot of people the second time in that way, and like this, that we can create an Ibrox atmosphere in Hampden also. It would be a huge achievement also from the fans to sit a little bit further away from the pitch, but still create the same atmosphere. So I hope they can get there, and we're going to give everything on the pitch that they are enthusiastic about it. That's our role to do also, of course.
Chris, a few years ago, I think it was the Malmo game, wasn't it? The first leg of the Malmo game, and Steven Gerrard, I think it was speaking to Rangers TV at the time, said, "I'm going to do something I've not done before." Some words to that effect, and he basically put out a rallying cry to the Rangers fans to create a siege atmosphere that would help them win against Malmo, and that worked for 45 minutes, and ultimately the players on the pitch couldn't carry through. That was a detrimental result because of what happened in that transfer window, because of what happened with Gerrard's tenure at the club. And I don't think it was coincidental that he saw the significance of getting into the Champions League playoff round for the type of player he could then bring in and how that could push Rangers on this season. Now, Clement wasn't quite as black and white in regards to that factor in today's press conference, but there's been a few times where he's made that similar noise about fans being louder because they're further away from the pitch, about the importance of the home atmosphere in a way that we've maybe not seen before in his tenure at the club. Do you think that while outwardly he might be saying that getting through to the next round doesn't really impact their transfer business that much, while he's making those noises, he will know the significance of even that amount of money to Rangers transfer business before you talk about the potential of getting into the group stage? Mm-hmm. And I think that you're seeing more and more in his answers, and I'm sure you'll hear it pre-match from him tomorrow night as well, that he knows just how significant a role the crowd might have to play tomorrow as his side tried to get into the playoff round, and obviously the club tried to access the money that is available when you reach that stage.
It's not really been a chest beating, table thumping type of message, but that's not really his style. It has been a bit more nuanced, if you like, but it has been a repeated message. And I mentioned it after the game at the weekend as well, almost every time he's spoken about Hampden or been asked about Hampden, it's this rallying call, if you like, of the fans have to play their part. As you said there, it can be cliche sometimes, of 12th man and that type of thing, but Rangers have history of big European results, big European occasions, but they've all been at Ibrox. Hampden is a very, very different stadium in terms of the atmosphere that can be generated. But the manager clearly feels that despite that difference, despite that disadvantage of not being at Ibrox, clearly still feels that the fans can have some form of impact on Tuesday night. And it's not a case of scaring Dynamo Kiev. It's not a case of whether it's Kiev or whether it's any other of the sides that have fallen at Ibrox over these last few seasons. It's not like terrifying opposition players into making mistakes. It's what it does for the level of your players. Like, can you run slightly quicker? Can you run slightly longer? Do you have a bit more belief in yourself and your teammates? It's what it does for you rather than what it does for the opposition, I think, is the main thing. Whether that translates to Hampden or not, only time will tell. Obviously, we will both be there tomorrow night. I think you'll be able to tell fairly early on what it's going to be like. Ibrox on a European night does feel different. It builds up earlier, and on the good nights, you know it's going to be a good night. On the nights where it's slightly down, you almost get a sense in the 5-10 minutes before kick-off and the first 5-10 minutes after the whistle, you kind of get a feeling of how things are going to go. And I think that'll be the same when we're at Hampden tomorrow night. Obviously, we'll turn up, we'll do our videos, teams will be announced when we're then sitting in the seats and the music comes on, the players come out and the game starts. I think you'll be able to get a sense fairly early of how this night could actually unfold for Rangers. Now, there's obviously a big onus on the players as well. The players have to come out and start in the right way, have to show the right mentality, show the right quality, show that there's a game plan. They've got their end of the bargain to hold up. Rangers will not beat Dynamo Kiev just because the fans shout loudly and sing and there's a great tifo behind the goal. That's not going to be enough. The players and the manager also have their end of the bargain to hold up as well. But we have seen that collective power. We've seen it time after time in these big European occasions. As it only 90 minutes tonight or tomorrow night, will show whether Hampden can actually hold that same special feeling for Rangers or not.
Don't know if I could do a game tonight after today's workday, Chris. But just briefly before we go, Hamza Igamane, the kind of saga continues. He's not quite in full training, but taking part in part of training as he continues to build up his fitness. Clinton and Ciala is in full training, not on a dissimilar path to Igamane, not quite involved in the first team yet, having been signed earlier in the summer or in the first team squad. He's not going to start tomorrow. I'd be very surprised if he does. Leon Balogun, the only injury doubt, I think, heading into tomorrow's game. Is that right, Chris? Anything else I've missed glaringly from the press conference that should be mentioned? I guess the fact that Jose Cifuentes was brought up by, I think, yourself or someone else, but Clement not giving much away on that potential outgoing.
No, I think until everything is signed, sealed, delivered on every transfer, he's not really going to, again, as we've seen, he doesn't really going to comment on speculation, no matter how strong that speculation may look at times. Cifuentes will be allowed to leave the club. I thought it was interesting. He was asked a couple of questions on moving players on. We know this is the situation Rangers are now in. They cannot carry a huge squad from a football perspective, certainly from a financial perspective. He needs players to leave before proper work can then be done in terms of more incomings. And I think it's getting to the frustrating stage now. Certainly for the fans, there's this urge for when's the next one coming in. But we've seen in the last few weeks, it's almost been this one in, one out. Rangers need the likes of Todd Cantwell, need the likes of Yanis Hadji, perhaps Ben Davies, for example. There's players within the squad who will be allowed to leave if the right offers arrive for them. It's a timing issue for Rangers, because when clubs want to buy them and when Rangers need players in, those two things are perhaps not marrying up right now. I think that might become more of a theme as the days and the weeks unfold.
Absolutely. We're going to leave it there. We'll be live tomorrow morning, of course, as we build up to Rangers against Dynamo Kiev. Remember, if you have not yet taken advantage, if you're not yet a subscriber to the Rangers Review, you can get a year for £12 with our new season sale. But hurry, because it only lasts for a few days ahead of the 2024-25 campaign. which is very much underway. Until then, thank you for joining myself and Chris. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.